The Bicycle Frame Builder's Apprentice, Chapter 15. Are you sure you don't want anything else? All shook their heads. I think we should have a look round. I've never been here before, Rosie added. Again all concurred, and Pearl took the lead in rising from her place at the table. Athersidge is an attractive and compact village, which, like many in what is now deemed to be wild upland country, was once highly industrialised. In the 19th century, its water-powered mills were replaced by steam, and any visitor approaching it would have found it shrouded in dirty, evil-smelling smoke. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, it remained a small agricultural settlement, with many inhabitants employed in handicraft industry in their own cottage homes, manufacturing brass buttons and wire, whilst others were engaged in quarrying, the high gritstone edges to its east and north being a major source of millstones used for milling corn and grinding metal. In 1750, the Atlas Works was opened and wire manufacture was mechanised. Thus the village became a major manufacturer of needles and pins. Later, a paper mill was built to supply the wrappers for those self-same products. Both factories were water-powered, until steam power was introduced in the early 19th century. The division of labour so crucial to the efficient manufacture of needles and pins was documented and made famous by the plagiarist Adam Smith in his Wealth of Nations. What he didn't document was the terrible price paid by the workers in the industry. The needles and pins had to be ground, using grinding wheels made from the local gritstone. As a consequence, the atmosphere and the workers' lungs were filled with fine metal and gritstone particles. The life expectancy of those who toiled and produced the factory owners' wealth plummeted to 30 years and ended up being the subject of a major public health inquiry. Unlike the Wealth of Nations, its report is long forgotten, just as it was largely ignored at the time of its publication. By 1992, well after the village's demise as an industrial centre, the village had become a magnet for hill walkers, rock climbers and cyclists alike, attracted by the nearby gritstone edges, high moorland wastes and the contrasting verdant valley of the River Derwent, which flows from the upper regions of the Hope Valley beyond Oak Village and its adjoining neighbour Castleton. Despite the attractiveness of the village, it wasn't long before the Kinder Peregrines were eager to be a wheel once more. Cycling is a peculiar form of transport in many ways, one of its peculiarities being that the reaching of a destination is not necessarily of primary importance, whilst the nature of the journey to that destination is of the utmost importance. Unlike a motorist, the cyclist doesn't just move through the landscape, he or she is part of that landscape, fully exposed to the elements of wind, rain, sun, frost and snow. Moreover, unlike a motorised vehicle, which you sit in or on in the case of a motorbike, the machine between their legs becomes a direct extension of the cyclist's limbs and muscles. As such, it remains subject to the rider's control, its speed completely dependent on the cyclist's whims, its performance limited only by the rider's skill and the degree to which they are able to provide it with sufficient power to overcome air and rolling resistance and the forces of gravity. Their ability to see, hear and smell all the delights that nature provides remains unrestricted by a metal casing, windscreens and soundproofing or a full-face helmet. When they struggle uphill, there is no engine to put under load save the engine that is their body, delivering power through their own legs. This is why the cyclist's brain enjoys such a buzz when the summit is finally reached and the pain of effort subsides. Then the rider can take pleasure in the views provided and anticipate the sheer joy of the reward to follow, the rapid, easy descent aided by gravity. Only walking for pleasure can come anywhere near matching cycling in this sense. Indeed, some would argue that properly defined cycling is merely a mechanised method of walking with knobs on. But cycling enjoys the extra bonuses of speed and the ability to cover relatively long distances. Amongst our intrepid group, Malc was the one who had studied these attributes of cycling most analytically. Such was only to be expected. Not only was he the most experienced, having indulged in the pastime for most of his life, succumbing to the addiction, and it is an addiction, when a mere lad of 10, he had also studied the art and science of manufacturing the machines to meet not only the individual customer's riding requirements, whether it be for touring, road, or track racing, but to match their physical measurements, in the same way a bespoke tailor manufactures a made-to-measure suit. Nonetheless, all his companions were on a fast learning curve, and each, including young Rosie, after obtaining sustenance and resting her weary limbs, had thoroughly enjoyed the trip to Addersidge. All were now eager to sample further delights on the agreed return route to Ayfield. This would take them back to Hope the way they had come. From there, however, they would forsake the road into Edale, with the intention of accessing Malc Cowle and ultimately Rushopp Edge by a somewhat interesting alternative. "What's that?" "The cement works, Rosie," Connie responded. "That's where our Richard works. Our Jem works in a limestone quarry way over the other side of the hill." Rosie wondered why she hadn't noticed the large towering white structure with its extremely tall, slender chimney dominating the hillside above the village to their left when they first arrived at the crossroads by the church earlier that day. They were now cycling through Oak Village, Connie and Mikey in the lead and riding two abreast, with Pearl and Rosie immediately behind them, and the tandem bringing up the rear. "Another mile and a half and we can have a break," Malc suggested. "I don't know about you, Pearl, but I could murder a cup of tea." They were soon through the small village and in open country again. The road, now almost level, meandered gently, following the course of the Derwent, a tree-lined remnant of the glacier's meltwaters that had carved out this valley at the end of the last ice age, bounded on the one side by the dark heather-clad gritstone hills separating it from Edale, and on the other by limestone peaks, the source of valuable minerals and essential building materials. Then they were entering the rather twee village of Castleton, once a quarrying and lead mining village, but now completely dedicated to tourism, some would say to the point of vulgarity, whilst others would profoundly disagree. Faced with a noticeable increase in traffic in both directions, Connie accelerated ahead of Mikey, and they all slipped into single file. They quickly found a cafe where they could sit outside in comfort, enjoy a brew, and watch the multitude of tourists hurrying and scurrying between the ruins of Peveril's Norman Castle and the famous Peak Cavern, peering into shops selling all manner of souvenirs, semi-precious Blue John stone artifacts, outdoor clothing, walking boots, waterproof hats, and other requisites, some of great value and some of no use whatsoever, except as a reminder of the visit. Once they'd ordered a pot of tea for 6 and supplies of fruitcake, Connie asked if they were going to climb up Winnett's Pass, or take the old road along the flank of Malc Cowle. "I think we should avoid Winnett's," Malc responded. "Do you think I can't make it?" Connie countered. "No, I'm sure you can, Connie, but I don't think you'll enjoy it. Just look at the traffic on the road. Winnett's will be full of cars heading in both directions. Your lungs will be full of petrol fumes before you're halfway up." Pearl smiled. "I don't think I could do it without getting off and walking, cars or no cars." "I've done it with Dad more than once," Tom informed them, "but I think we should go up the old road. Winnett's wears Dad out, and then I end up having to get him home. Being a tandem stoker's a form of hard labour sometimes." Suitably refreshed, the peregrines were on the move once more. Malc and Tom led the way. The traffic was so dense heading towards Winnett's it was down to a crawl. He quickly found a space and moved to the centre of the road, overtaking the cars, all of which he knew would be turning left within a quarter of a mile. The rest followed his example, Pearl bringing up the rear, keeping her eye on the youngsters. They soon passed the entrance to the steep limestone cliff-lined pass, and the road ahead was clear, climbing fairly steadily, and at an easy incline initially. Before long a 5-barred gate forced Malc to halt. Tom immediately dismounted to let his father and the rest through, before closing the gate behind him and remounting. They were now beginning the ascent of the broken road, the gate having been placed there to prevent access by motorists, with the sole exception of those requiring entrance and egress to and from Man Farm. By the time the tandem was on the move again, Connie was already powering her way up to the first left-hand hairpin bend. The others were following, but not without difficulty. They were no longer faced with an easy climb. Shortly after the first bend, the tandem riders had caught Pearl, Rosie and Mikey. Malc, only too conscious of the fact he had to keep up his momentum or give up and walk, moved out to their right and overtook them. By now Connie was well ahead, but the frame builder and his son knew she would be climbing off her bike soon enough. Sure enough, she dismounted, looked back to see where her companions were, and decided to wait for them. Malc and Tom eventually pulled up alongside. "What's up, Connie? You're not going to allow a small crack in the tarmac stop you, surely?" "Small crack?" She looked at Tom in a way that indicated she thought he'd lost his marbles. The lad laughed. The fact was the road had slipped, and 2/3 of its width at this point was a good 3 meters below its once adjoining surface. Furthermore, for the next 100 meters at least, the situation was repeated. Indeed, at points there was scarcely a meter of the old highway adjacent to the hillside to walk along with any degree of safety, and even then there were sections where they had to lift their bikes bodily to cross a jagged crack and step up a good metre onto the next bit of tarmac. For Malc and Tom, the sheer weight of the tandem, combined with its long wheelbase, presented additional problems. As a result, they remained in the rear, so as not to impede the progress of the rest. Eventually they completed the obstacle course nature had placed in their way, as if she were laughing at mankind and all his puny works. Connie opened the gate to access the good bit of road left, and allowed her fellows through, before joining them in contemplating the view back towards Castleton, now reduced to a small miniature of a village down in the valley far below.